Hey, brand builder, Rory Vaden here. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out this interview. As always, it's our honor to provide it to you for free. And wanted to let you know there's no big sales pitch or anything coming at the end. However, if you are someone who is looking to build and monetize your personal brand, we would love to talk to you and get to know you a little bit and hear about some of your dreams and visions and share with you a little bit about what we're up to see if we might be a fit. So if you're interested in a free strategy call with someone from our team, we would love to hear from you. You can do that at brandbuildersgroup.com/podcall, brandbuildersgroup.com/podcall. We hope to talk to you soon.
I am so excited to introduce you to somebody who is a friend, a client of Brand Builders Group, and somebody who is really becoming a mentor in many ways because she teaches a very specific topic that I'm so excited to introduce to you. So you're about to meet Rebecca Zung, and she is a negotiation expert, and specifically an expert on negotiating with narcissists. She also has a huge personal brand. So she's a YouTuber. She's got, she got over 100,000 subscribers in 10 months when she launched her YouTube channel. But really, before she was a personal brand, she was one of the top 1% of attorneys in the nation. So she was actually recognized by U.S. News and World Report as a best lawyer in America. She has written several books on this subject. So Negotiate Like You Matter, and then Breaking Free. But her new book that is coming out now is called Slay the Bully: How to Negotiate with a Narcissist and Win. And I've just been really captivated by Rebecca's content and her intelligence in terms of how she's built her business. And then also we've gotten to work with her a little bit and get to know her behind the scenes. But I thought, hey, we got to have this topic of negotiating with narcissists on our show because it applies to all of us. So anyways, Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you. You are actually one of my favorite people. You are so brilliant. I'm really actually in awe of you. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, thanks, friend.
And I don't say that actually very easily. Let me just tell you that. I don't suffer fools very easily. So I have to tell you, I'm really, really impressed by you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, and I genuinely am impressed by you. I mean, 40 million plus views on YouTube, several 100,000 followers on Instagram and social. You built this massive email list, well into the six figures, and hundreds of thousands of followers on Facebook. But, before all of that, you were a true expert. I mean, you're just like the epitome of who we like to work with at Brand Builders Group, this person with deep expertise who really solves a problem in the world. And I have to tell you, and my very first question I want to ask you about is such a fundamental question, which is, how do you define a narcissist? Because honestly, that term wasn't even on my radar until I met you. And then, I started following you and like seeing all the stuff, and going, wow, so many people are resonating with your content. So apparently there's a lot of narcissists out there in the world, and, maybe my eyes are just being open to that. So can you start there and tell us what that is?
Yeah, I actually wouldn't have been able to define it myself either, even though, I probably came across a lot of them in my practice and even in my personal life as well. So the way I like to define it is really in layman's terms. And in my book, of course, I give the DSM-5 and all of that because I felt like I needed to, which is what the mental health professionals use. But I like to use layman terms because I think it's easier for all of us to understand. And it is a spectrum. And so if you go all the way to the end of the spectrum, there is a legitimate personality disorder there sitting at the end of the spectrum, which is narcissistic personality disorder. But obviously, as you get closer and closer toward the end of the spectrum, you're going to get closer and more of the characteristics, right? And all of us, of course, have some characteristics of being narcissistic at times. And there is a healthy version of narcissism, by the way, too.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So, but what narcissism is a person who has no feeling of value. And I say they don't feel valuable because obviously all human beings are inherently valuable, but they don't feel any sense of internal value. And so what they do is they go around trying to get feelings of value from external sources. And so the way it's described is narcissistic supply, and that's the what everybody refers to it as is narcissistic supply. What I have done is actually tier that and tier it into diamond level supply and coal level supply. So they get this, you know, external diamond level supply from anything in how they look. So it could be big houses, impressive friends, lots of money, all the things that you think of as the best things of how they look to the world, you know, puffing themselves up by making themselves look good. And then there's what I call the dark underbelly of narcissistic supply, which is making themselves feel better by pushing other people down, which is degrading people, controlling people, manipulating people, making other people squirm. So that's what I call coal level supply. But what they do is they suck you dry of energy because they're trying to make themselves feel better, but it's a black hole and it can never be filled. So you are left feeling totally and completely depleted, yet they're still starving. And they're like desperate for air, gasping for breath. And it's scarcity to the utmost extreme. And it can never be healed, and it can never be, it's like a salve that they're trying to put on themselves, and they can never get enough. And so you are there and feel totally depleted. They're still starving, and there's this black hole, and it's goes on and on and on and on. And that's why they have no empathy. That's why they have no empathy. It's like they're in pain all the time, and it's deep shame.
Interesting. And so that's part of the characteristic is no empathy for others, because they're just consumed with basically trying to satisfy this void, which is impossible for them to fill with external stuff, which is impossible for them to fill.
Correct. Correct.
So let's back up a little bit, because your personal story is, inspiring and fascinating. I was raised by a single mom, and who sold Mary Kay, and that's always like part of my story.
Oh, did she have the pink Cadillac?
She never got the pink Cadillac. She did have the red Grand Am for a minute, for like a hot minute.
Okay.
So she did it more of like a side hustle than like a career, but I still learned a lot of like personal development principles from sort of being around like the Mary Kay culture and the events and stuff that she had. But anyways, can you tell us, like, I'm curious, how did you become one of these top attorneys? And you've been on Extra, and I know you've had like some very high profile like divorce cases that you used to be involved in, and I know you're still like a partner in your firm, but like how did you get into all of this stuff? Like, tell us your personal story.
Well, interestingly enough, I'm actually first generation Chinese on my dad's side, and second generation German on my mom's. So half Chinese and half German. So I always joke that I have no fun genes whatsoever. It's all like very, very serious and extremely organized. But my dad came over from China when he was 15. He was from Shanghai. He went to Columbia undergrad medical school. My mom was an operating room nurse, and my dad was an anesthesiologist. So, I graduated second in my class from high school. And then my version of rebellion was to drop out of college and get married at 19 and have 3 kids by the time I was 22. And so my parents were just loving that, I'm sure,
just devastated. I mean, you dropped out of college, got married at 19, and had 3 kids, and you're 22 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I got divorced. still in my 20s. And, my parents were like, you're done with us. They didn't give me any more money at that point. Like, that was it. I mean, they still loved me and all, but it wasn't, in those days, at this point, it's like, the late 80s or whatever it was like that. They weren't like 1990 or whatever it was. Like, they weren't like, oh, we're going to give you money or whatever at that point, like this
You were on your own. You were an adult. You were out there on your own.
You're done. We're done. Or no, I say this is the 90s by this time. It was the 90s. And so, they were like, okay, you can do whatever you're going to do. And so I got divorced and went back to law school. This is definitely in the 90s already at this point. And I met my husband in law school, and we, I'm still in my 20s at this point, right? And we have now been married for 23 years, and we have a 21-year-old daughter. And I, at that point, I mean, I still made law review. I went to University of Miami Law School at night. And I mean, they don't even have a night program anymore. I mean, so, it was a crazy time in my life. It was crazy. And so we, I ended up starting at a law firm where the partners were, top family law attorneys in the country. Okay. They were both members of the academy, the International Academy. One of the partners that I worked for, she had been, president of the American Bar Association for the country. And, so that's where I started, and high net worth family law is a very, very specialized area of the law. You have to know, tax law, estate planning law, business law, trust law. I mean, it's a very, very high, highly specialized area of the law. So that's where I started right from the beginning. And I came up through that. They retired. I ended up starting my own practice and continued on. I was in Naples, Florida, which is a very affluent area. At one point when I had my daughter, I stopped and I ended up going to Morgan Stanley for a few years. I did wealth planning there for a little while, just like 2 years. And I had my Series 7 and 66 for a little while. And then I went back and had my own practice. And then just, I wrote my first book in 2013. I had John Gray actually wrote the foreword, or he wrote an endorsement for me. And from there, I actually started to get some television work. I started doing, TMZ and, some things like that. And that was when I started to think, maybe I want to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial. It was like, I didn't have to even step outside my firm anymore to do any networking. It was like hamster wheel, for my practice. And I just started to feel like, let me do something else. So in 2017, I merged my practice with 2 other guys who were both members of the Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. And my husband and I moved to Los Angeles, and I was going back and forth. And that was when I started learning about funnels, and I just started like teaching myself some things. And I got involved with this other person at that time who turned out to be a narcissist. And that's when I started to.
In the business?
She wasn't, it wasn't a law firm, no, but it was an entrepreneurial endeavor that,
And so that's when you really started diving in specifically to negotiating with narcissists. Because I think about the people listening to this show, I think you go, you might be negotiating fees with clients. You could be negotiating customer service issues with like people trying to like cancel or get a refund. You could be negotiating something with a business partner, right? In terms of We hear a lot of those stories. Right? A lot of our clients have had very tumultuous, we'll say, separations from business partners and joint ventures and things like that.
Yeah, well, I ended up having that. I mean, I ended up having that, you know, because, you know, I mean, and they always start out the same, these narcissists, you know, very charming, very perfect. You know, I had this idea for a business and I had really kind of started the process with it. And it had my name on it. I don't want to give too many details because I don't want to be, you know, giving like, oh, this person coming back, you know, but I had an idea and, you know,
but you basically, the short of it is you had this experience where suddenly you were tied up with a narcissist. And I guess ultimately what I'd love to hear is how do you negotiate with the narcissist? Like knowing now what some of their characteristics are and why, which is super helpful to understand the reason they are the way they are is because they're starving. They're searching for basically love and importance and to feel valued. And that's a really scary place to go, oh, you know, nothing I can do is ever going to make them feel that way. So they continue going, which means I'm going to constantly feel drained. So, you know, I always feel like when I think about negotiation and the way that I approach negotiation, like I don't think of negotiation as a battle. I've always thought about negotiating. I think of negotiation as collaborating and going, how do I help you get what you want and you help me get what we want and we all win together. But if somebody doesn't have empathy, if they don't care, they go, I have zero interest in helping you get what you want. That, you know, how do you negotiate with that person?
Yeah. And therein lies your problem right there. So right behind me, I've got a book that I wrote called Negotiate Like You M.A.T.T.E.R. Robert Shapiro wrote the foreword. And in that book, I talk about how both sides want to feel seen, heard, and know that they matter. And if you don't walk away with both sides getting some amount of value out of it, the deal's going to fall apart. And I have participated in thousands and thousands and thousands of negotiations, and I know what it takes to get a deal to stick. Okay. Here's the problem when you're dealing with a narcissist. Okay. Let me explain something about how a narcissist was formed. And this is actually it blew my mind when I was doing the research for this book. How a narcissist was formed during childhood is actually a result of trauma to the brain. So when we are dealing with trauma as adults or as human beings, we are presented with, when we're, you know, feeling like we are under fire, we feel like we need to fight or flee, right? Fight or flight. And when that happens, our brains emit chemicals to allow us to prepare to be strong or to run faster. So it's adrenaline or whatever it is, right? You know, to be able to, you know, so it's the sweat glands go and all of that.
Cortisol, all that stuff.
Cortisol, all of that. Exactly. So when that happens on a continuous basis, though, it actually can start to cause damage within the limbic system of the brain, especially for children. And it can actually cause arrested development to that area of the brain. And what that is called narcissistic injury. And when that happens for a narcissist, as they grow, while the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is the thinking area of the brain, can continue to develop, that limbic system part of the brain, as it continues to, as they grow, when they're presented with situations where they feel like they need to be back in survival mode again, and it doesn't mean it's rational to you, it means it's rational to them or reasonable. So it could be an eye roll, it could be a tone, it could be anything where they feel slighted or they feel like they need to be back in there and they're triggered. then that narcissistic injury is triggered and that limbic system comes back into play and takes back over. And now you're not dealing with rational. Now you're not dealing with reasonable anymore. You're dealing with that limbic system part of their brain. And what I learned in my research is that sometimes they don't even remember what they have done during that period of time. And what happens is it's actually called splitting.
Meaning they don't remember what happened to them when they were young, or meaning they don't remember the irrational
what they've
stuff
done.
they did to you.
What they've done to you.
Wow.
And it's actually a phenomenon called splitting. And so they actually will say, I didn't do that. That didn't happen. We didn't have that conversation. That's not how it went. And so, you know, you're not dealing with rational, you're not dealing with reasonable. And so here's the other issue. Here's the other issue with that. These narcissistic people, narcissists, not, you know, they are, let me go back to this other conversation that we started with, which is the narcissistic supply conversation. Remember that conversation we had, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you were having this conversation about where do we want to go with this, most people think, well, narcissists just want to win, right? They want to win. They want to look good. They want to come out the winner. That's not necessarily true. That only takes into account one form of supply, and that's diamond level supply. It totally discounts and forgets about coal level supply, which is manipulating you, seeing you squirm, making you sweat, controlling you. They love that too. They need that too. And so when you're dealing with them in a negotiation, both things are at play constantly. And they don't even realize that sometimes. Sometimes it's actually subconscious on their part. And so you're sitting there going, well, how can we rationally and reasonably come to a conclusion here? How can we figure out a resolution? The very question that you asked at the outset of this is what a rational and reasonable person would ask. But that is not the question that they're asking. So what your motivation is and what their motivation is completely different when you sit down at the table. Totally different. Their motivation is, I want to control you. I want to see you squirm. I enjoy seeing you sweat. I enjoy manipulating you. And so they will gameplay. They'll constantly move goalposts. They'll change their own deal. You'll come back and say, I accept every single one of your points. And they'll say, oh, deal's already switched. It's already changed because you took too long, because I don't like your face anymore, because you parted your hair on a different side today.
Yeah. That's so frustrating. I mean, it's so you have this acronym SLAY, which is sort of like, okay, so if you're in this situation, and that's super insightful, I've been in this situation before, to go, what they really want to do is not only win, they want to bury you. They want to
just
hurt
bury
you.
you.
Just play with you. Like they just want you to feel, they want you to feel awful and horrible. And, you know, controlling is the word. Like they're able to control you. So
they'll take themselves down to take you down.
Yeah. Interesting. That's fascinating. So then what do you do? Is that what SLAY is about? Is SLAY basically what you're supposed to do to deal with all this? Because this is very discouraging and very, like, what you're describing is so real. It's like, you know.
But that's why what I do works. That's why I literally have thousands of testimonials from people who said I've saved their lives. That's why what I do works. That's why I have 40 million views on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because what I do works, because I understand this.
So talk us through SLAY, like walk us through that.
Yeah. So strategy, leverage, anticipate, and focus on you. So Strategy is you have to have a vision. You have to understand where you're going to go. You have to have a GPS. You have to, because you're on the offensive. I mean, you're on the defensive so much when you're dealing with these people that you're just like, oh my God, I can't think anymore. I'm paralyzed. I'm powerless. I cannot think. And most of the time when people are at the other end of this, they have cognitive dissonance. They have CPTSD. They can't think straight anymore. So the first thing you got to do is know where you're going to go and have a very specific vision about it, right? You talk about so beautifully about, having a thought, conceive, believe, achieve, knowing where you want to go, make it specific. Same principle, right? Understanding where you're going to go, have a very specific vision. So that's number one. Then creating that action plan. That's all part of my strategy, having an action plan, knowing exactly where you're going to go.
And does that mean knowing what you want? Is that what you mean by like just being clear of like, this is what I want to have happen at the end of this?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so many times when I ask people what it is that you want, the first thing they'll say is, I just want them to leave me alone. I just want it to stop. That's not what I want.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
You're saying like specific outcomes that you document, that you go, here's what a win in this scenario looks like for me. And just the first step is getting clear on that yourself.
Getting clear on that yourself. At the end of this partnership, I want to take over my company. I want to buy them out. Here's how much I think the company is worth, whatever it is. Or I want them to buy me out, or I want, the company needs to be sold, or, what's the specific outcome for you? Mm-hmm. How does that look? How does that happen? Okay. I mean, what does the partnership agreement say? Half the time when I ask people that question, they don't even know if they have a partnership agreement. What? I mean, so, there's questions that need to be asked. And then what are the steps that need to happen to make that happen? All right. So that's number one. Number two is L. That's your leverage. And many people want to go straight to leverage. You can't have leverage. You can't get to that point unless you've developed a strategy first. Okay. You need to know what's motivating these people. So here's your diamond level supply versus your coal level supply. So diamond level supply, what's most important to them? What is most important to them? And how, as far as what they look like to the world, it's going to be different for every narcissist, but it's basically every narcissist has something that, is most important to them as far as how they look in the world. That's going to be the most important to them, and they will protect and defend that at any cost. At any cost, that diamond level supply, they will hang on to that more importantly and most preciously than anything. And that's the thing that you have to threaten. You have to threaten a source of supply that's more important for them to keep than the supply that they get from jerking you around. And then threaten that source of supply. But you can't actually take away that source of supply, because if you do, then your leverage is gone, obviously. All right. And then you've got to come up with like 40 different ways that you kind of like have the guns pointing at it. So what does that look like? Summary of their lies and inconsistent statements, or, potentially, deposing. I call it depose to expose, so potentially deposing their new source of supply, their new paramour maybe, or their new business partner, or all of the people in their new company, or because, a lot of times you're breaking up in a partnership, they go to take half the clients with them. So, are you going to go depose all the new clients? What are you going to do in order to potentially expose them and have this conversation? I call it ethically manipulating the manipulator. These are all very legal things that you can do. I'm not talking about blackmail. I'm talking about things that you can do. These are offensive strategies. Most of the time when you're on the other end of a narcissist, you're an empathic person. You're a person that goes, I don't want to have to do that. It seems cringy to you. You don't want to do that? Then I hope you enjoy being on the other side of a steamroller, because that's what's going to happen to you. You have to be offensive when you're dealing with this, because, you know, they have to feel like the hammer is going to get dropped on them, you know. And then A is anticipate what the narcissist is going to do and be 2 steps ahead of them. What are they going to do? Well, first of all, there's 3 different types of narcissists that I like to, you know, sort of talk about, which is covert, overt, and malignant. They each act differently in negotiations. And in my book, I talk about how they act because they're each different, which is, you know, we can't really get into all of that right here, because it's kind of long, but, you know, they do act differently in negotiations. But the one thing I do want to talk about here, just briefly, is that they are going to try to trigger you. They are going to try to get under your skin. So you have to stand firm. You have to stay calm. Don't take the bait. Don't allow them to go fishing and you end up with a hook in your mouth. You know, like, don't defend yourself, don't explain, don't justify. They're going to say stuff to you like, oh, you're, you know, like for you, Rory, you are a person who prides himself on being, you know, a person of integrity, a person who's honest, a person who does what he says he's going to do when he says he's going to do it. So for you, what would be the first thing you're going to do? You're dishonest. You're a liar. You know, you're a horrible father. You never show up for your kids. So they're going to say those kinds of things to you first thing, because they're going to know that that's the first thing that would bug the crap out of you.
And make you squirm. That's the, like, what can I do to just like control you and manipulate you and see you just be completely off kilter? Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And when you say don't, you know, like, don't defend yourself. I mean, so this is, I'll share this. One of the very, like, the very first time that I was in like a real lawsuit, and this is like a piece of legal advice that I wish somebody would have told me. Like, the one thing I wish somebody would have told me was, don't read their letters. Like, I read their letters and it was like, this letter is outrageous. This is a flat out lie. This is like unbelievable. How are they even saying this? And it's like, that's the point of the letters.
Yes.
like there's no legal substance whatsoever to it has nothing to do with what is accurate.
Yes.
It's literally for the purpose of getting you riled up. So, you know, in subsequent lawsuits I've been involved in, I just throw the letters away. I don't even look at them. I just give them to my lawyers and say, you know, like, go ahead and go through this.
And they always come at 4:00 on Fridays, by the way.
Yeah. On your birthday, on their birthday, if there's an anniversary or something, like, they do it on purpose. Yeah. Which is, it's funny because it's a very predictable.
Right. That's why I say anticipate what they're going to do, and don't defend yourself. Never explain, never justify, you know,
honestly,
pretend like you're reporting the news. Yeah.
Once you have the perspective, you go, oh my gosh, this is hilarious. Like, it's such a predictable, immature, like, what would somebody that just for no other reason to try to hurt you, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, it's so that's interesting. And not justifying, like, if you're justifying, they are winning. You're doing exactly what they want. If you're defending yourself, you're doing exactly what they want to do.
Exactly.
Fascinating. Okay, so that's anticipate.
That's A, yep. And then Y is the U. And so I split U into 2 sections, which is you staying on the offensive, which I, you know, just sort of addressed a moment ago. And then Y, the other part of Y is 100% of winning is your mindset, and you alone define your value. And, you know, I used to say 80% of winning was your mindset. And then I interviewed Bob Proctor and he corrected me on my own podcast, I will have to tell you. And and then I was like, you know what, he's right. And so I like to tell this story about your value, and that is that I actually I told you a moment ago that I had been practicing law for about 8 years. And then I went and was broker at Morgan Stanley for a couple of years. My daughter was little at the time. And then I decided, a friend of mine was leaving Naples and decided to give me her law practice. Basically, she was like, I have about, I don't know, it was like 15 clients or something. And she's like, I have these clients. I'm going to just basically dump them in your lap and you can, start a law practice with them. And I was like, okay, nobody's ever going to be giving me a law practice ever. So this is my chance to start a practice. And so I did that. And I had a business coach at the time who's still somebody I go back to often. And she's one of my very best friends and one of the smartest people I know on the planet. And I said to her, oh, I am so worried that the people of Naples are going to think that I'm such a flake. That, she was a lawyer first, and now she's back. She was a financial person and back to being a lawyer. And I was so nervous that the people of Naples were going to think I was such a flake. And she said, people will think what you tell them to think. She said, you can tell them to think that you're a flake, or you can tell them to think that you are the only family law attorney in town that has a financial background. So therefore you are actually more qualified than any other family law attorney in town. Which story would you like to tell? And I said, oh, maybe I'll tell that story. And so that's how I went ahead and branded myself, by the way. And I within 2 years, I had clients like Arnold Schwarzenegger's goddaughter, and I was traveling in Europe with him and all kinds of, I represented the founder of Melting Pot restaurants and all kinds of, amazing clients and, people who very clearly weren't going to be hiring a flake. And, I think that had I held myself out and was apologetic and said, oh, I'm a flake and, that sort of thing, that's what people would have seen. And so I always say that you and you alone define your value and people will think what you tell them to think. So, you have to believe it though. You have to believe it first. It's not the other way around. It's not like, once people believe in you, then you'll believe in yourself. It has to come from you first in any negotiation or in anything that you do.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great point and true about the mindset. And what's interesting is whatever you tell yourself is what becomes true, right? Like you basically get to author your own future with just whichever story you tell yourself. I did want to ask you, I wanted to go back to the leverage for a second, because you basically said, there's these two types of supply, the diamond supply and the coal supply. And you said, if we threaten the diamond supply, figure out what they care about most, basically figure out where they look good and talk about how you could threaten it. How would you attack the coal supply if they want to manipulate you and control you? Would you want to play into that and make them think they're controlling you and make them think that they're winning? Or would it be the opposite where you go, no, like show them that what they're doing has zero impact or on you whatsoever?
Yeah, I have two answers for that. So one is, and that's a great question, by the way. I love that question. So I have a couple of different ways that I go into in the book for that. One is that I tell people that they can either, and it kind of depends on what's going on in their situation. But so if there's something that they want from them, for example, I tell them that they can use a tactic that I call fluff or favor, vomit later.
Okay.
It's like fluff up their ego, because that's what they want. They love when you fluff up their ego, and that diamond level supply is always, in play. So, you can say something like, oh, if they're great at QuickBooks, for example, oh, can you can you handle the QuickBooks this month? You're so much better at it than I am, and it'll be done so much faster if you do it. You're so much more efficient at it, and something like that. And you make sure you don't say anything good about yourself or anything like that. No tone, because I always say narcissists hear tones like dogs hear whistles. Like, even if there's no tone, they hear tone. So, and then, I always say, if you have to go shower or vomit later, that's fine, but, get them to do something for you. So fluff or favor, vomit later. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I say, to use, it's wise to use the element of surprise. So, never let on what it is that you're up to, what it is that your leverage is. Nothing. I would act like they're winning. I would act like you don't know what's going on. I mean, even till the very end. I mean, I would throw out decoys about what it is that you actually want in a negotiation, because if you tell them what you actually really want, then they're going to make sure that you don't get that thing, because they don't want you to win. They don't want you to have that thing, and then at the very end, if you end up with the thing that you wanted, or the settlement that you wanted, or whatever, I would act like, oh my God, they really got me, or whatever. You've got to take your ego out of this thing, because if they think that they got you or didn't get you or whatever, it's like, at the end of the day, if you can walk away from this thing and be done, and not have to look back and have them out of your life, that's what you want. Because especially the more malignant that the narcissist that you're dealing with, the worse it's going to be. I mean, I know for me, with my narcissistic business partner, I was just like gray rock. So, that's another term that they have. And that was one of the other things I wanted to mention to you. The more you can just have no reaction to the types of things that they're trying to do, and that try to get a reaction out of you, the more you can just not take their bait, the better it's going to be for you. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's really, great feedback. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. So I actually, in my SLAY program, I've got, 50 key phrases for disarming narcissists, so that, people told me that they print them out, they keep them by their computer, they use them for emails, things like that, because, I mean, another phrase that I really like is, I agree with you. You're like, I agree with you. That's what you think. I agree with you that that's your opinion. I agree that I heard that's what you said. I mean, you've agreed to nothing when you said that, right? But they heard you say, I agree with you, or I understand, or I hear you, that sort of thing. I mean, just however you can keep the conversation like there, here.
Yeah, that is really, really, really powerful stuff. Really fascinating to hear this. Like, so you mentioned the book a couple times. So Slay the Bully is the new one that is coming out. Where should they go if they want to pre-order or order a copy of it, depending on when they're hearing this?
They can get it at slaythebully.com. And it's available wherever books are sold, but slaythebully.com is the best place to go. Check it out and get all the bonuses that come along with it, which is, a lot of really cool stuff, including, access to my private launch team, and
bam.
Yeah. And, masterclass with me, and, early access to the manuscript, depending on, as you said, when you're hearing this, and all kinds of really other cool stuff. So
yep, I love it. So we'll link that up in the show notes, and you can check that out. The last little question I've got for you, Rebecca, is just what advice would you give to somebody who's really feeling discouraged right now? you know, like I said, I've been in this spot before, and you can be acting like the gray rock. I think that's really great advice. I wish I would have had that advice. You can be doing this stuff. And in reality, deep down, you can still feel quite a lot like crap, like you are being manipulated, like you are dealing with someone who's unreasonable, like you are losing, like they're getting their way with everything. And there is just, you just feel like it's completely unfair. What would you, what would encouragement would you give to somebody that is in that spot right now?
First of all, I'm going to tell you, they don't attach themselves to you because you have so little value. They attach themselves to you because you have so much.
Mm.
That's one of the first things I tell you all the time. They don't want the clearance rack item. They want the thing they want the bright, shiny star, right? They're hitching their wagon to a star. So remember that. And second of all, baby steps. So in order to course correct, I tell you, step 1, don't run. Step 2, make a U-turn. Step 3, break free. Because, you know, they didn't condition you overnight. And it was a conditioning that happened. You know, it's a conditioning. So to decondition yourself, it's not going to happen overnight either. So you're basically making a whole full-on U-turn with this. So the very first step with that step 1, don't run, is that very first step. The only thing that you feel like you can do today in making that first step is drawing a boundary, one boundary. And if that first boundary that you feel like you can do today is just saying to yourself, you know what, my boundary today is going to be, I'm not allowing myself to be spoken to disrespectfully anymore. And that's what I'm going to, start today. Then that is a great way to start. And I actually at disarmthenarc.com, I have free phrases that you can download for disarming narcissists, and they're free. So feel free to go get those too.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for this. It feels empowering to have a little bit of insight to what's going on and how to navigate a way through this. And we're so excited about the book and wishing you good luck with that. And we just wish you all the best, my friend.
Thank you. You are the best too. You are the bomb.